How's it look?
I don't know. Hang on. Let me adjust it a little bit.
Is my hair okay?
It's perfect. Looks pretty good. All right, hang on. Let me get in the shot now.
All right, yeah. Come on.
Okay. Aaron, how you doing, man?
Doing good, Kyle. How about you?
I'm all right. Now let's see. 6 feet.
Oh. No, we ain't got to do that.
No more social distancing.
No more social distance.
Well, it's been a while since we did one of these videos.
Yes, it has. It's been a long time.
But nevertheless, history has continued to go.
It sure has. Sure has. To keep on going too.
Yeah.
Sure
I tell you what, I did miss you because this was fun.
Yes, it was. It was a lot of fun.
Was your beard that long, man?
Well, I don't think it was.
Yeah. Well,
that's been a long time ago.
I know, it really has. Well, we just love doing these videos.
Hey, what are y'all doing?
What is all this? What do you mean?
We go to Haps to get lunch, and y'all just sit down and take over?
We're not.
Oh.
Sorry, y'all.
Yeah.
Maybe next time.
Get up.
All right.
Have fun.
Can't leave the camera for 1
I
second.
know, you can't leave it for a minute.
I don't get that, but that's all right. Well, welcome to another episode of Ramblin' Around Rowan. We're happy to see you, and we're happy to be back. Well, it really has been a long time since we have done any types of history videos. I think the last one we thought was 2021, maybe 2022, but even then it was early in that. So we have missed it a lot, and we're happy to be back. So we've been thinking and researching and trying to figure out what are our next subjects that we're going to do, and we really wanted to reach back into an area we had not covered very much, Rowan history, and that's the Revolutionary War and all the events that happened before, during, and after that. So there's going to be multiple videos that may not completely focus on the revolution just itself, but also the events that lead up to it, the results that happened afterwards, and the people that were in this area that had a role to play in all of it.
And one thing that we mentioned in one of our very first videos was that there was going to be a future park on this block here in Salisbury. And it is awesome to be able to sit here in that park and make a video. And the last time we were here filming, we had fences up all around, and it was still in the middle of construction. And I'm sure you can hear the kids around us playing in the water feature. Just had a whistle over there. So hopefully you can hear us and not just everything going on around us.
Yeah, it's nice that there's life in this park, but give us 5 minutes of silence and we'll be out of their hair.
That's right.
That's okay. Yeah, that was from our first video when we talked about the future park. So it's really cool to be sitting here in a phenomenal park and just enjoying it just like a bunch of other people in Salisbury.
Absolutely. Well, revolution-wise, it's one of those things you can't just start in 1776 because the first battle of the Revolution wasn't even in 1776.
Right.
Most people consider it Lexington Concord, excuse me.
There we go.
In 1775. So when you were talking about Rowan and the Revolution, you have to go back a pretty good ways to the 1750s when Rowan County and Salisbury were created. Rowan County, 1753. Salisbury was created in 1755. And Salisbury was created during a war called the French and Indian War. Quite a few Rowan County citizens went and fought in that war up around Pennsylvania, including people like Griffith Rutherford, Daniel Boone, and those types of people. That war ended in 1760, but the official peace treaty wasn't until 1763. And a big part of the 1763 peace treaty was the proclamation line of 1763, which drew a line down the mountains beyond which European settlers were not supposed to cross. It was a big agreement with Native Americans, and the Cherokee took that agreement very seriously. Issue is, while Daniel Boone was in the army going up to Pennsylvania, he kept hearing stories about this Kentuck territory that was out beyond the mountains. He and many other people from Rowan County thought after the war, they were going to be able to settle as far west as they wanted to with as much land as they wanted to have.
this winning of this war that made sure that Britain was dominant in North America, or at least in the American part of North America, would have really been something that could have given them a lot of morale and just kind of tied them closer together to the mother country, as they might have called it. But when this proclamation line came out, and several other things that came after that, because of course British Parliament had to pay for this war. It was an expensive war. And so their thought was, we fought the war for the colonies to keep them safe in America. So since we kept them safe, they should have to pay for a good bit of this war. And so that was, the end of this war is really going to start this long list that's going to begin of all these different grievances that the colonists would have towards England.
And those grievances aren't just the colonies against England. In Rowan County, you have basically a civil war that develops before the Revolution, we refer to as the Regulator Movement, which, while it does have ties to the greater goings-on, it's also hyper-local and shows a lot of fractures within colonial society locally that really show up in the Revolution and make the Revolution a pretty nasty thing here in this area.
On the beautiful grounds of St. Luke's Episcopal Church, and as with any other parish, when the county was founded in 1753, the parish was established here as well at the same time. But this beautiful church was not built until 1828, which, if you're trying to compare dates, you have a parish that's there a long, long time before the church is actually built. But thankfully, we have somebody who knows just a little bit about that and can tell us more about this church.
This church was not built because pretty much the people of Salisbury and Rowan County didn't want it to be built, especially before the Revolutionary War. Something that we often forget is that before the Revolution, the Episcopal Church was called the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church was the official church of England. It was the only legal church to belong to during the 1700s. Matter of fact, if you belong to a different belief system, different denominations, what we call them today, you actually could not call your building a church. It had to be called a meeting house. You have the Presbyterian meeting house out in the western part of the county that today we call Thyatira Presbyterian Church. You had the Dutch meeting houses on the eastern side of the county that today we call Oregon, Lower Stone, and Union Church. And you could not get married legally in one of those churches. Technically, your baptisms didn't count in those churches. And crucially, your preachers were not actually paid by the state. Now, the reason why all that makes a difference is because most of the people who came here to Rowan County were not Anglicans. They were not English. They belonged to these different sects, these different denominations. And the Presbyterians, the Lutherans, and the German Reformed especially, they wanted their churches to be recognized as official. So what they did, they actually got themselves elected to the vestry board of St. Luke's Parish in 1753 and every year on to make sure that there could be no church built. Matter of fact, they wouldn't even collect the tax to help pay the pastor. Thomas Drake, one of the first rectors of this church, wrote to his friend Benjamin Franklin in the 1750s and said he couldn't stay here. He was starving to death in this area. So he had to come back to the coast where there were more Anglicans, where he could make more money and actually afford to feed his family.
Okay, so you talked about several different denominations. You talked about the Presbyterians, the German Reformed, you talked about the Lutherans, but I didn't hear anything about the Baptists. I'm a Baptist. We have a pretty big church that's here in downtown Salisbury. What would it have been like to be a Baptist worshiper back then?
Well, Baptist worshipers back then were seen as some pretty weird people. They were definitely in the minority at first. Matter of fact, there's not any records of a significant Baptist church on the west side of the Yadkin River in what we now call Rowan County. Most of the Baptists would have been across the river in Davidson County and also Randolph into Guilford, along with the Quakers, the Moravians up around Winston-Salem. But yeah, the Baptists, they were kind of kept out. The way that the German Reformed, Lutherans, and Presbyterians were already struggling with the Anglicans, the last thing they needed was a group that was not accepted anywhere in Europe to be, within positions of power and things like that. And this struggle around religion, also some class issues, and land ownership created what we've referred to as the regulator movement. So let's do a quick and dirty of the regulator movement. I'm gonna try to fit this in as fast as we can. It's a very complex movement, but we only have so much time. In the 1700s, you had this separation that we were talking about by religion. And so people who are living in what was then Rowan County on the other side of the river, largely the Baptists, the Quakers, the Moravians, people like that, they weren't necessarily accepted by the prevailing power structure in Salisbury. It's called a courthouse ring. You have this group of people who are the justices of the peace. They do things like make sure the land is apportioned out correctly, make sure the deeds get filed correctly, and they're kind of corrupt in their jobs. What they'll do is, if you're one of their friends, if you're a Lutheran, German Reformed, or Presbyterian, they'll help that transaction go through fairly smoothly. But if you're not one of their friends, it might cost a little bit more, like a lot more. And you might have to pay multiple people multiple bribes. So that type of thing led to a lot of hurt feelings in town and led people to get kind of violent sometimes, because the last thing you want to do is pay for land more than once. There was also an issue of, yes, we're in North Carolina. Yes, we had a colonial government, but the Rowan County line, the southern Rowan County line, was something called the Granville line. And the Earl Granville owned all the land north of that line, despite the fact that we're in North Carolina. And so the payment that was going in didn't actually go to North Carolina, it went to him and his family. And his officers that were taking the money from the courthouse people, they were also very corrupt. So as you can see, this situation was not ideal. You have a lot of corrupt people doing a lot of corrupt things, and this all came to a head in 1771 in Alamance. It's called the Battle of Alamance. The governor of North Carolina, William Tryon, marches an eastern militia up into the backcountry, the Piedmont of North Carolina, and that militia just happens to be led by a guy named Richard Caswell. Governor Tryon, Richard Caswell are marching this huge group up into the backcountry. They get to this place called Alamance, and there they meet up with about 3,000 men who have gathered, who called themselves the Regulators. They are ordered to disperse. They don't want to go anywhere. So the governor lines up his men and he tells them, fire. The militia doesn't fire. The governor rides his horse out in front of the militia and he says, fire on them or fire on me. Which is something that you would really have to have some stones to get out in front of some people and say like that. And the militia fires on the Regulators. It's called the Battle of Alamance. It didn't last very long. There weren't a lot of casualties, but it completely destroyed the Regulator movement. And it also created a lot of hurt feelings at a very pivotal time in North Carolina and American history, because that's 1771. Remember, we are already on the road to the revolution in this more broad colonial sense. And you have North Carolina fighting other North Carolinians. Who is going to be a loyalist? Who's going to be a patriot? All of this is up in the air at this point in 1771. What is this? And grabbing the microphone. If that makes a sound that I think it makes, it's
going to be great. Yeah, no doubt. 54. Okay.
All right. Do we need to do an official, like, yes, it has been a while and things like that, or?
We can. Yeah, sure.
I'll let you. You're better with stuff like that than I am, so you go ahead.
Fact checking is important. That way we'd never know that the Martian invasion in Grover's Corner in 1936 actually happened or not, you know, that kind of thing.
28.
Hey, I'm gonna try that again. It's early.
St. Luke's is always a little bit early, and
They
then
want to be first.
yeah,